Hey everyone, this is Matthew Bolin, and I'm going to explain to you how the divine travel method that's recently become popular in Minecraft speedrunning works. This is something which I mostly discovered on my own, but I would like to really shout out Supercoder79 for help with some of the code digging, and also Closet Witch, who really did a ton of the work making this strat practical for speedruns once we'd proven it existed. Okay, so what exactly are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to show you how to look at things in a Minecraft world and use them to figure out optimal spots to place a nether portal in order to come out near the stronghold. And this is very important in speedrunning because oftentimes you don't want to go back to your start portal and you have 10 obsidian, so you want to build a portal and end up near the stronghold, which is where you're ultimately planning to go. Top speedruns sometimes die to being thousands of blocks away from the nearest stronghold. So what I'm going to show here today is a way to get the worst possible distance to under 700 on the right seed. So there are certain features in the world which, if your seed has them, you can look at them and then you can work out coordinates to get much better blind travel. So I'm going to show a few examples of this first, and then I'm going to get into an explanation. This is not going to be a tutorial for every single thing. This is, you can see there, I've got a lot of notes here. Those notes will all be in the description, but there's so many individual strats all underneath this same umbrella that I cannot explain them all in this video. That will have to be left up to other members of the community, and indeed some of them already have been made. But let's first show, this is the first example that we found. So these are nether fossils. So unbelievably, nether fossils in the 0, chunk in the nether. So we are currently in chunk 0. If you have a nether fossil that starts in this chunk, it tells you information about the stronghold angle. So let's see how exactly it does that. Okay, so let's see how you do this in a run. So there are, up above, there are 14 types of nether fossils, okay? So in a speed run, you would have to know all 14 types of nether fossils. There are already tutorials about how to recognize them all. It's not that bad. And what you do is you identify the starting block of the fossil. So these are structure blocks. So you see how fossil 1, fossil 2, it goes up to fossil 14. And the starting block is the one which the structure block starts underneath. So if you just place down a structure block with this name and load it in, you can see where the start block is. And so what we're going to do is, for these 14 fossils, we're going to identify which type of fossil we have at 0. So first thing you need, of course, is a fossil in the 0 chunk. And if you're lucky enough to have one of these, it happens maybe 1 in 15 to 1 in 20 worlds in my experience. But maybe it's rarer than that. If you're lucky enough to have one of these in the 0 chunk, what you can do is you can identify the start. So here I've placed a gold block at the start of this fossil. And you can look at your targeted block and measure the x-coordinate of the targeted block. So in this case, our x-coordinate is 0. Okay? And by the way, that targeted block works from a significant distance out, so you don't even need to run up to the fossil if you're very good at identifying where the fossil starts. And what you do is we have a table here of optimal coordinates. So this is these are the optimal coordinates for a fossil start with an x-coordinate of 0. And I've already tried this coordinate on this seed, so why don't we try this one so that it's something fresh. So I don't actually know how close this will be precisely, but because of this method, I can guarantee that the Stronghold will be less than 800 at worst, honestly, blocks from my Nether portal when I build at these coordinates. So I read off the table where to build my portal. I traveled roughly here. We ended up out here, and now let's see how bad it is. So it's 340 blocks away. This is about what you can expect. Sometimes it's a little bit over 400. Sometimes there's been a few people who have, gotten very close ones, very far ones. There's already been a seed found where this gets you inside the Stronghold. It definitely leads to portaling into the Stronghold with far higher frequency. But 340 is a significant improvement upon the 1,000 block blind travels that one frequently sees in top runs. So this is what this method is sort of capable of. Now, I'm not going to talk too much more about fossils right now, because they are only one of a few features that you could have. So here is one with Tundra animals. So Tundra animals work at 0, 0. This one, our spawn wasn't at 0, 0. And in fact, it's misleading for me to say Tundra animals. In fact, any animal at 0, 0 works. Tundra animals just happen to have some even nicer properties than the usual animals. So we're going to teleport ourselves to 0, 0. We're going to see that indeed, on this seed, we have 3 rabbits spawning in the 0, 0 chunk, okay? So again, we're seeing that we need the 0, 0 chunk to talk about the Stronghold. But if we see animals that started to spawn in the 0, 0 chunk, we can now know something about the Stronghold. And furthermore, in Tundras, animals are slightly rarer, which means that we can talk more about the Stronghold. And in this case, we saw 3 rabbits, and believe it or not, the number of rabbits is going to get us an even closer guess as to where to go to the Stronghold. So, you don't really need to know why this works. I will be explaining that later in the video. But you'd scroll down, right? So I've got tables for, this is animals, just like sheep and pigs and stuff. And then if you've got one of these special 5 animals, but it's not a Tundra, you use this table. If you've got turtles, you use this table. But here we have a rabbit spawning in a Tundra, and we saw 3 rabbits, so that actually means we take this one. So that is where we should build our portal. So let's see if it works. Oh. I want you to... Unfortunately, the number of rabbits only lets us talk about the distance of the first stronghold. There are 3 strongholds in the opening ring. So if you have rabbits, you only really know the distance of the first stronghold by counting the rabbits, but you can still use the coordinates as if they were just normal animals. But okay. I've gone into a wall here. I want to quickly say that the tables of coordinates that I will be leaving in the description, these tables of coordinates are just recommendations. Unless you have something seriously good like a ravine, which we'll see in a moment, you can afford to miss the coordinates by a bunch of blocks. It's not a big deal. You know, please don't lose a minute of time trying to like tower up to the coordinates or something dumb. So what were the coordinates again? Yeah, so there we go. 289. No, wait. We're already here. So let's see how good we did here with the animals. Locate stronghold. 357. Again, that's sort of on the better side, but not very much so. So again, we're seeing some good results. And actually, this seed is extra special. When I was just picking out seeds where this would work, I noticed that this seed has something extra special going on in it, which is that this seed has a ravine starting in 0, 0. So you can see this ravine here starts in the 0, 0 chunk. And ravines are extra rare. Only 1 in 50 chunks tries to start a ravine inside it. But if you know that your 0, 0 chunk has a ravine starting in it, you can get incredibly more accurate predictions of the stronghold angle. So let's see. Do I have a table for ravine in here? I do. So ravines don't talk about distance. So we have 3 options for coordinates here. But from the fact that we had 3 rabbits on this seed, we actually know that the stronghold's maybe 290 blocks-ish from the origin. So I'm going to adjust this coordinate, because this coordinate is only a rough... Ravines only tell us angle, and we have an estimate on distance. So instead of teleporting to these coordinates, I'm going to teleport out to around 290. Again, the coordinates are a little bit rough guidelines, but this should be roughly the same angle, and it should be roughly the same angle. And also, because I had 3 rabbits, I know that this stronghold is extra far. Had I had 2 rabbits, I would have known that this stronghold was extra close. So we've come out here, and because we have a ravine and we had the rabbit information, I'm expecting this to be extra good. Oh my god! Okay. Okay, 51 blocks is extraordinarily close. You can't... It's a little bit dishonest for me to say that, like, you'll get this every time, because you won't. Like, ravines, you maybe expect under 400, usually. This is on the ridiculous side. Had I built the portal down even lower, I might have even ended up, I don't know, in a cave adjacent to the thing or something. That is very good. But again, so, you know, not only does this method remove the percentage, not only does this method remove all of the worst possible locations you could build your portal at, this method also increases the chances of getting that dream time save of portaling into the stronghold, which I find very exciting. But of course, ravines are very rare, and they're not usually as good as that. But even still, that sort of thing can happen. Okay. Let's see. So, so far, I've only shown you things that work at 0, 0. We do have something that works anywhere in 1.16. It's not very good. Well, it sort of is very good. And it's a little bit complex, so I'm going to leave this up to Closet Witch to explain. But essentially, nether portals, when you go through them, we're expecting to go to, given my overworld coordinates, we're expecting to go to around 4694. I got that by doubling my chunk coordinates, and then you check if these coordinates are greater than or equal to 8. Closet Witch explains this much better. But we're expecting to end up at 4694. And so it turns out that because nether portals are like 4 wide, you can tell from where the overworld coordinates were supposed to send you. You can tell whether or not the portal is... which direction the portal is facing. And it turns out that portals have a tendency to face a certain direction on a given seed. So if you're lucky and your portal comes out on flat ground, you can determine the orientation of your portal, and that tells you the quadrant that the first stronghold is in. And it eliminates 1/4 of the world as possibly having a stronghold in it. Again, I'll link Closet Witch's video describing the exact details of how to do this in that strat, but roughly we're seeing that I'm actually looking at 4694 here, so this is the center block of the portal. And we can use that to figure out, because the portal doesn't really have an exact center, we can use that to figure out which way this portal is facing. So in this case, looks like it's facing east, I think, if I didn't do that wrong. And the final thing I want to mention is that this is not a 116 only thing. And in fact, in 114, there's an extra thing. Well, actually, any version before 116, there's an extra thing that predicts the stronghold, and that is the Nether Fortress. I have this example prepared because I loaded up this world in 114, just to give an example because I didn't want to switch versions. But let's head over to the Nether. So in 114, it turns out that the value that we care about is going to be the x-coordinate of the Nether Fortress start. So this is a Nether Fortress. If you, yeah, I know, speedrunners, you guys don't know what a Nether Fortress is. Nether Fortresses are grown out like a tree, okay? There's a starting piece. This crossroads is the start. And then the entire Nether Fortress is grown out like a tree from this starting crossroads. So what you need to do in a speedrun would be you would need to find the chunk coordinates of this starting crossroad and measure them. And again, there's a table that you could use. And this would tell you the distance the first stronghold is from the origin, but not the angle of that first stronghold. And there's a nice trick to tell if a given crossroads is the start of the Nether Fortress, and it's that it has no room leading to it. So if you've got sort of like a sheer cutoff leading to your crossroads, then it's the starting crossroads. This is a trick due to half-ten. So that's how you can identify it. It's even easier when the Nether Fortress is exposed because, there's just very clearly the bridge just suddenly ends. On other crossroads, if they're supposed to end, they'll have some extra little crinkly bits on the end. So okay, you can use that to identify the starting chunk. So in this case, we go to the middle. We're in chunk -911. And so this one's a little bit more complicated, but it depends on what quadrant you're in. Again, there's so much stuff here that predicts the stronghold that talking about any one structure, explaining how to do it is a little bit hard. I just want to show that this works. What this boils down to is this -9 is going to tell us that this stronghold will be between 6/8 as far as it could be and 7/8 as far as it could be. And the way that you get that is in the negative-positive quadrant, you would negate it and then subtract 3 mod 8 is what I would do. But, okay. Is this where my portal was? Okay, we're going to briefly make a point. But if you remember, I said that Nether Fortresses only gave distance. We're going to quickly go in and see. So remember this Nether portal trick that I told you wasn't all that useful on its own? Here we start to see it shine a little bit, because it's a source of the stronghold angle that works well in concert with other sources as well. So I have a few ideas that aren't fully fleshed out yet that involve this trick. But currently we've got a Nether Fortress telling us distance, and this portal tells us which quadrant it's going to be in. So that portal was a south-facing portal. So that ends up telling us that the stronghold will be in the positive-negative quadrant and between 6/8 and 7/8 of the possible distance it could have been. And so this is just a teleport to the stronghold that those two things we're talking about, just to show you, yeah, it exists. And the distance is something like 0.83 which I do think is in the range. Because what, 6/8 is 0.75 and 7/8 is 0.875. So yeah, the distance is as predicted, and it's in the quadrant as predicted. So that's an example of what's possible in pre-116. This works as far back as 1.8, and in 1.8, the strongholds are much closer to the origin. So knowing the quadrant and distance like this is actually extraordinarily powerful. I don't know how useful this is in 1.14, but I've also not looked through the 1.14 code base yet, so I don't know if there might exist more. And now, that's all the in-game examples that I'm going to show. If you can see in my text file, we have a bunch of things that work. So we've got the nether fossils, we've got the animals, we have ravines, and we've got caves starting at 0, 0. And then there's stuff like portals and the nether fortresses in pre-116. And then there's a bunch of stuff with structures at 0, 0. So I've listed some coordinates for the big ruined portals, but there's some variant for every structure. I will quickly say that all these different things, they give you varying levels of information about the stronghold. So the fossil tells us angle accurate to within 1/16 of the circle. So we'll draw that in a moment. Animals are angle accurate to within 1/10, so slightly worse than fossils. But if you have one of these 5 special animals, then they tell you about the distance of the stronghold. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, but for the most part, you don't need to know how this works. You need to know that, like, when you see rabbits at 0, 0 in a tundra, read this table. And when you see rabbits at 0, 0, so it's very easy to use in runs once you're a little used to it. So yeah, and I find it extremely exciting. So we're going to quickly explain why it works and what exactly all these different things are telling us. And for that, I think I'm going to get out Microsoft Paint. Fantastic. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand is how strongholds work. So let's draw this. So this is sort of the stronghold ring, right? So the game is going to pick a random angle. I hope my handwriting is readable. And a random distance. So what do I mean by that? So the game will pick some angle randomly. It could be any angle on the inner circle. And then somewhere, so let's say it did pick this angle, so it wants to place the stronghold somewhere on this line. It will then pick a random distance, and so let's say it picks there. And that's going to be where your stronghold tries to place itself first. In fact, it's then going to pick a random chunk in a 15 by 15 area around that, which depends on some biome stuff. But currently, all we're interested about is the initial location it picks. And then the other 2 strongholds are always evenly spaced out in terms of angle. So maybe right there and maybe right there. So the angle between, so this is 120 degrees. This is also 120. This is also 120. And, but the distances of the second 2 strongholds are also random. Okay? But we are going to understand how exactly it picks this random angle and this random distance. So it turns out the way that the game does that is it takes the raw world seed. So it takes the seed and it sticks the seed into the Java random LCG. That is a terrible G. So what this is a random number generator. What it does is it takes the seed. So the seed is sort of, well, let's give it, the seed is inside the LCG, or the, I guess we can ignore the fact that it's an LCG. Get over here. Well, at least for now. So let's just call this a random number generator. An LCG is a specific type of random number generator, but it's not so important right now that we understand the inner workings of this magic box. And so this is going to use the seed to make a random number for the angle. So that's the first thing it does, okay, is it makes the angle. The second thing it does is unimportant. It turns out it uses the first two random numbers to make the angle, but the second one's just for like a bunch of decimal points way after the start of the angle. So we don't care about being that precise, so we're not interested in that one. And the third one is the distance of this first stronghold, okay? And after that, it does a lot of garbage with like moving that stronghold around and choosing bombs and stuff. But this first number and this third number produced by this RNG, so this first number and this third number produced by this RNG, give us the angle and the distance of the stronghold. Okay? Now, this is a very annoying thing for speedrunning, though, because we don't know the seed on a random seed glitchless speedrun. And also, this RNG is... There's a lot of math inside this RNG. You don't want to run this thing forward once. But there's a funny trick, though, which is that, like, if we've got one RNG... and it's got seed inside it. And we've got another RNG. And this also has seed inside it. They're both going to spit out the same three numbers as their first three. So this one over here for Stronghold, this is going to spit out angle, then something we don't care about, and then distance. And this one over here, which is something else. But it still has seed inside it. This is the key thing. They both were given the same number initially. This is going to produce the same first three numbers. Just what it uses those numbers for, what the game uses those numbers for, would be different. But if we could find something like this that is another random number generator that happens to also be seeded with the world seed, then we could look at the stuff that's made with these numbers. Well, not that one. We don't care about the second one. We could look at the things that it makes with its first and third number, and then use those things to figure out what the numbers were over here when they got made into angle and distance. Okay? So how does the game usually put numbers into RNGs? Okay? So Stronghold is actually a very, very special case. Okay? So Stronghold just gets seed. So it's just given seed. Okay? Usually, if it's something like animals, I've already showed you animals. Let's show you how animals get seeded. Animals get seeded with X, so X is the chunk coordinate that they're in, plus F of seed. This is just some function of seed. It's unimportant that you understand how it works. Plus Z times G of seed. And then this XOR the world seed. Okay? So this is what animals are given to do their randomness when the game decides whether or not to spawn animals. Do 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 do. And oh, I guess I should quickly explain XOR. Um, XOR. If you don't understand XOR, don't worry. The main thing to understand about XOR is that 0 XOR A is equal to A. And so yeah, this is what you need to know. That 0 XOR a number doesn't change that number. Okay? Because now you might have guessed why we're going to 0, 0. Because if this is 0, then 0 times f of seed plus 0 times g of seed XOR seed equals 0 XOR seed equals seed. So animals at the 0, 0 chunk, so at 0, 0, I guess we'll note these are chunk chords used in this formula. At the 0, 0 chunk, animals use the world seed itself to do their randomness. And this is just a mistake. I don't think Mojang realized that this would happen at 0, 0. That like the sort of this part of the formula, which is meant to scramble it away from 0, 0, it breaks down at 0, 0, and you just get seed out the other end. And so, let's look at the Stronghold again. So if you recall, the Stronghold was looking something like this, right? And we chose an angle. So let's draw a bit of an arrow, right? So the angle sort of starts here. So like if the Stronghold chose an angle of 0, it would go here. You know, this is like pi over 2. So, you know, as the angle gets larger, you move around the circle, okay? And animals are a 1 in 10 chance, okay? So how does the game specifically do that 1 in 10 chance? Let me get more room on the paint. So the way that the game does the 1 in 10 chance for animals is... So you've got the box. We now have seed in it because we're at 0, 0. And this is used to produce a number. So our first number in our list out of this random number generator, let's call it n, sure. Animals will spawn if n is less than 0.1, okay? That's the key thing to get out of this. And so, if we see animals at 0, 0, then the first number out of a random number generator seeded with our world seed is less than 0.1. And at in taigas, this is 0.07 in tundras. So what that tells us, if we go back to our stronghold diagram, right, is that the first stronghold was in the first 1/10. So this is 1/10 times 2 pi. So the first stronghold is somewhere in this. Come on, paint. All right. Just pretend like it had filled in the... How is that not a closed area? Hold on. We're going to take a brief digression. I think it was this gap here. And we're going to make it green because green is good. There we go. So this is the first stronghold is somewhere in this region because we know that the first number, because we saw animals, the first number that the seed spat out must have been less than 0.1 or 0.07 if we're in the tundra biomes. And that implies that our first stronghold is somewhere in this green region. Okay? And if you remember, the other two strongholds are at 120 degrees or, you know, what, 2 pi over 3? 2 pi over 3 radians. away from the first one. So these regions are also going to be good. And so we know that that's where the 3 strongholds are. And that's enough to guarantee that you're never really going to be more than 800 blocks away from the stronghold. Maybe it's 900 for animals. I'm a little bit unsure of the precise details. Fossils are similar. So you've kind of got 16 options. Oh, I should mention, you remember how I said some animals were special? So for stuff like rabbits, polar bears, and striders, they also choose a number of animals to spawn. So rabbits can choose to spawn either 2 or 3 rabbits. And if you get 2 or 3 rabbits, if you get 2 rabbits, that means that the third number was smaller. So you're closer to the origin. If you get 3 rabbits, that means that your third number out of the random number generator was bigger, which means you're further from the origin, right? So that's why the number of rabbits tells us things, okay? And so now let's look at how fossils work, okay? So animals worked with, if I quickly grab the real mouse and scroll over here, animals worked with this formula with a plus sign in it. Everything else that I'm going to show you today works with a slightly different formula. So if you look over here, this is again my list of everything that works. We've gone over animals so far, but we also have these caves. So all the different cave variants. And then we also have some structures. And actually, the Nether portals are weird. The Nether portal orientation stuff just uses world seed because it's ancient code that I don't think Mojang wants to touch. There's nothing fancy going on there, and that's why it works everywhere. They just use the world seed there for some reason. Yeah, so pretty much everything else is going to use something that looks very, very similar. So everything else, the RNG... Oh, I accidentally switched to this bigger pen size. We'll keep it. Gets fed. Again, we have one of these f of seed times the x coordinate of our chunk. This time we've got an XOR in here. And then we have our g of seed again times the z coordinate. And all of this XOR the seed. Okay, and again at 0, 0, we get f times, I guess we should write s there, XOR g of s times z XOR s. This is 0. You know what? There's an eraser tool. That's not a very useful eraser. I maybe should have done like a selection and a delete, huh? Okay, 0, and we get 0, XOR 0, XOR S, and if you remember, 0 XOR anything is that thing back again, so 0 XOR 0 equals 0, 0 XOR S equals S, so, which I wrote as short for seed. So, at 0, 0, things which are seeded with this formula will also spit out the seed, which I've spelled with 3 E's. Well, that's embarrassing. Anyway, at 0, 0, these things which use this formula, which is pretty much just caves, ravines, mine shafts, and structures get seeded with this formula, and at 0, 0, this formula just spits out seed. So again, we have another random number generator that we can observe to figure out what the random number generator in charge of the stronghold was doing. Okay, so let's maybe get a new... Let's get a new one open. You know what? Let's save it too. But I'm not good. Okay, now I'm feeling less inclined to save it. Don't save. Haha. Okay. Where was I? Okay, precisely. So I'm just going to quickly explain how this would look with fossils. So fossils are technically a structure. A fossil will always attempt to spawn at 0, 0. I had intended to draw 16 of these, but that was apparently a stupid idea. A fossil will always attempt to spawn at 0, 0. And when it does that, it will use that formula we just saw to seed a random number generator. And that random number generator is in charge of choosing the coordinates to start the fossil. Okay? So we can imagine we have ourselves a chunk. And the fossil can spawn, you know, there's 16 x coordinates within the chunk. I think that should be 16. Yep, think it is. And so the fossil chooses a random number between 0 and, well, again, we can say 0 and 1. It's not really. But the size of that number indicates where it goes. So if it were to pick something like 0.4 of the way along, it would probably end up like there or so. Yeah. This is a very rough drawing. Don't take that as gospel. But you get the idea. The size of the random number indicates the size of the x-coordinate of the fossil. And because the x-coordinate is the first thing the fossil does, and the angle is the first thing the stronghold does, this divides the stronghold up into sort of 16 different pizza slices, people have been calling them, which I think is a pretty apt description. Although it's kind of more like pineapple to me. If you've ever... Let's make the axes bigger. I'm so good at drawing. And yeah, so it divides it up into 16 segments. One for each possible coordinate of the fossil that you got. This is positive x. This is positive z. And that's sort of what this looks like. And so all that this file is doing is it's giving you coordinates in the middle of the appropriate region. So at 0, this gives you the coordinate right here for Stronghold 1. So it just grabs the middle of the region, and that's the coordinate it tells you. That's kind of why these recommendations are only a guideline. Because this region is fairly large still. I mean, if you go to the middle, like this distance here is only 788 blocks. So you're pretty much always going to be under 800 blocks away from the stronghold. For you to not be that, it would have to have started like as far away as possible, and then then have jumped to a biome, like over 100 blocks away from you. So this is why you were seeing the numbers earlier in the video, why they were so good. Because it doesn't take much, honestly, when you know that it's in such a tiny region around where you went. And yeah, so that's how fossils work. That's how the animals work. You know, what it boils down to is at 0, 0, random number generators, the formulas that they use to give the random number generators seeds breaks down and just always spits out seed. And because it's just spitting out the world seed, and because the strongholds just use the world seed, If we can measure the relative size of that first random number, we get the stronghold angle. And if we can get the relative size of that third random number, we can get the distance of the first stronghold the game attempted. We can never really get the distance of the second two because those are sometimes hundreds of calls in the future, and it's unpredictable how many calls in the future. So there's nothing that you can really measure reliably to get the distance of the next two strongholds. But you can get the distance of the first one, since that's the third number out of the generator. And yeah, and so that's roughly how this works. So we've explained fossils, we've explained animals. Again, these animals are special because these have a range of animals that they can spawn in. In fact, for technical reasons, the number of possibilities for the pack sizes of these animals all need to be powers of 2. So otherwise, the Java uses a different way to generate the random numbers that doesn't tell us anything about the stronghold. But when it's a power of 2, it works out fine. So striders have 2 options. They can spawn 1 or 2 striders. Rabbits have 2 options. They can do 2 or 3. Polar bears are 1 or 2. Pandas are 1 or 2. Parrots are 1 or 2. Turtles to end up being 1 and 4, but they're so rare that I don't know if this will ever happen. But if you do get a turtle, you can sort of imagine that if you know from animals existing, that gets you angle within 1/10, and then turtle gets you distance within 1/4. That's starting to get very, very, very good. So it can be really exciting, as you saw, where I had a ravine earlier. So ravines would tell you that that first number was less than 1 in 50. So they just carve out like the narrowest of slices. And if you have animals on top of that, like, oh, it's so good. But yeah, so let me just make sure that I finished explaining this. And ravines, caves are like ravines and stuff. They just have a different chance. So I've written the chance of this thing even existing. And yeah, so that's where we're at about now. Fortresses pre 1.16 were a little bit broken. It depends on actually the quadrant that the fortress starts in, but 2 of the 4 quadrants around 0, are usable. And fortresses are very similar to fossils in that they're choosing an x coordinate between 4 and 12, or maybe it's 4 and 11. They choose an x coordinate between 4 and 11, at least in the positive quadrant. And that x coordinate is the same, uses the third random number out of the generator. The first 2 are to decide if the fortress should spawn. But that third number out of the fortress number generator is the x coordinate, and the third number out of the stronghold generator is the stronghold distance. So that's why fortresses tell you distance in pre 1.16. And so yeah, that's about all I want to cover for today. I will say that there are some things like ocean ruins at 0, which have a lot of potential and technically work under this method. We simply haven't studied methods to identify different. No one's really done a deep enough dive on investigating like orientations of these various structure types and the different subtypes of the structures and stuff like that. There's a pretty deep rabbit hole here. I expect the various sub-strategies to be continuing to be developed over the next few months. This is just sort of an update video of where we are. The other thing about this is that this doesn't stop at the stronghold. Already, some of you might have noticed that the 2 formulas that I showed you look pretty similar if like the x coordinate is 0. And so you can do things like find caves underneath animals. I'll probably do a video on non-stronghold versions of these sorts of strategies eventually. And there is still stuff to be explored. I have read every single part of the code that uses the world seed, but there are some things which almost predict the stronghold, but have a minor error that's unpredictable that makes them a little bit unreliable. But some of the most promising candidates for like portal into the stronghold levels are like that. They have a minor chance of error, and we're working on cross-referencing those against the Nether portal stuff to try and fix that error. So if you want to see progress on that, I have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/admiral_stapler, and I'll be streaming at least some of the future work on this live there. For now, I will leave these tables in the description, and I'm sure that the community will make more and more videos about how to use this stuff. I just wanted to get an explanation out of why this works and sort of show it in action. So thank you everyone for sticking by. And yeah, stick around. Please subscribe. We've got more coming.